Imagine this. You're living in a quiet village when suddenly dozens of cats start falling from the sky, parachutes and all. Sounds like a joke, right? But in 1950, this was real. A deadly disease, a chemical hailed as a miracle, and a disastrous chain of events that led to one of the weirdest rescue missions in history. This story has it all: science gone wrong, collapsing homes, rats running wild, and cats being dropped from military planes to save entire villages. Stick around because what you're about to hear is so unbelievable, it has to be true. In the dense, lush jungles of British Guiana, what is now known as Guyana, a strange series of events unfolded in the early 1950s that would echo through history as one of the most bizarre, unintended consequences of modern intervention. A mission that began with good intentions, to curb the spread of disease and protect human lives, eventually spiraled into an ecological disaster. This story, often told as a cautionary tale in environmental science, would go on to be known as Operation Cat Drop, an operation where dozens of cats were parachuted from the sky. But to understand why cats needed to be dropped from airplanes, we must rewind to the chain reaction that started it all. British Guiana in the late 1940s and early 1950s was a tropical paradise grappling with a common enemy, malaria. Spread by mosquitoes, this disease plagued vast swaths of the population, causing illness, death, and widespread panic. At the time, the most popular solution to combat malaria was the use of a chemical compound known as DDT, dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane. Introduced during World War II and hailed as a miracle pesticide, DDT was effective in killing mosquitoes and, by extension, controlling the deadly malaria outbreaks. British colonial authorities, under the guidance of the World Health Organization, WHO, launched a wide-scale campaign to spray DDT across British Guiana. Planes flew overhead releasing fine clouds of the chemical over villages, fields, and water bodies, while health workers sprayed the interiors of homes. Mosquitoes died in droves. The malaria threat seemed to fade, and people began to breathe easier. For a moment, the operation seemed like a complete success. But what the health authorities failed to realize was that an ecosystem is not a collection of isolated organisms. It's a web of interconnected life. And when you tamper with one strand, you risk unraveling the whole structure. As DDT blanketed the region, it didn't just target mosquitoes. It killed other insects indiscriminately, many of which were essential to the ecosystem. Among the unintended victims were wasps and beetles that played a critical role in controlling the population of leaf-eating caterpillars. With their predators gone, these caterpillars flourished and began decimating thatched roofs and crops. Entire villages saw their homes begin to deteriorate as the caterpillars chewed through the thatching material at an alarming rate. But this was only the beginning. Another unintended consequence began to unfold more quietly, but with much deadlier results. The DDT worked its way up the food chain. Lizards, which fed on the poisoned insects, began to die off. Cats, which preyed on the lizards, also began to die, not because they were directly sprayed with DDT, but because they were eating the lizards and accumulating high doses of the pesticide through a process known as biomagnification. As the cat population plummeted, an entirely new threat emerged: rats. With their natural predators gone, rats began to multiply rapidly and spread across villages. These weren't just a nuisance, they were dangerous, disease-carrying vermin. With the rapid spread of rats came another outbreak, not of malaria this time, but of the bubonic plague and other rodent-borne diseases. What started as a campaign to save human lives now threatened to create a new epidemic. It was a perfect ecological storm. Each solution brought a new problem, and the village communities, once optimistic about the eradication of malaria, were now dealing with the crumbling of homes, plague-infested rodents, and a precarious environmental imbalance. The authorities were at a loss. Eventually, a rather unorthodox solution was proposed. If the cats had disappeared and that was what led to the rat explosion, then why not bring the cats back? But this was no simple task. British Guiana was vast and largely inaccessible by road, especially in the remote areas where the rat problem was most severe. The villages were surrounded by thick jungle, and the only practical way to reach them was by air. Thus was born the idea of Operation Cat Drop. In collaboration with the Royal Air Force, and reportedly with assistance from the World Health Organization and local colonial authorities, the plan was to gather healthy cats from other parts of the country and airlift them into the affected regions. This might sound like the plot of a satirical novel, but official records and multiple accounts confirm that crates of live cats were indeed loaded onto military aircraft, fitted with makeshift parachutes, and dropped into the jungles of British Guiana. The image is almost comical. Dozens of bewildered cats descending from the skies, drifting on parachutes into villages that had once been their natural domain. But the operation was deadly serious. The cats were needed to re-establish the ecological balance and control the rat populations that threatened to overwhelm the villages. Surprisingly, it worked. As the cats settled into their new environments, they resumed their natural behavior, hunting the rats and pushing back the population explosion. Slowly, the rat-borne diseases subsided, and the villagers saw a return to something resembling ecological normalcy. The thatched roofs were repaired, crops began to regrow, and the jungle village ecosystem stabilized. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a lesson learned the hard way. Operation Cat Drop became a symbol, an almost cartoonish yet deadly serious warning about the dangers of interfering with ecosystems without fully understanding their complexity. The DDT campaign had reduced malaria, but at the cost of triggering a domino effect of unintended consequences. It had demonstrated, in brutal clarity, how interconnected species are and how fragile ecological balance can be when tampered with. The story of Operation Cat Drop also serves as one of the earliest real-world case studies in systems ecology and the study of trophic cascades. The concept that removing one species from an ecosystem can cause a ripple effect across multiple levels of the food chain. The events in British Guiana would later be referenced in academic textbooks, environmental documentaries, and ethical debates surrounding pest control, conservation, and the use of synthetic chemicals in nature. And yet, even decades later, the story retains a surreal quality. The idea of cats floating down from the sky to save villages from rats still captures imaginations and leaves people wondering, how could such a strange plan ever have been necessary? As it turns out, it wasn't just a case of strange necessity, it was a stark reminder that nature doesn't operate in straight lines. Every species plays a role, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. And when humans attempt to override that natural system with chemicals, shortcuts, or ignorance, the results can be catastrophic, or, in this case, require parachuting felines from military planes to restore the order we disrupted. Some historians and environmentalists point to Operation Cat Drop as a symbol of colonial arrogance, the idea that human knowledge, particularly Western science at the time, could engineer perfect outcomes without listening to or observing nature. Local communities often had a more intuitive understanding of their environment, but their voices were frequently drowned out by scientific overconfidence. The consequences of that silencing were visible in the poisoned animals, the deteriorating homes, and the desperation that led to the absurd yet necessary cat airdrops. There are conflicting reports about the exact number of cats dropped during the operation. Some sources suggest dozens, while others claim the number may have been closer to 100. What is confirmed is that the cats were chosen with care, placed in specially constructed wooden crates with small holes for ventilation, and each crate was attached to a military-style parachute. The drop zones were predetermined based on where the rat infestations were the most severe. Villagers reportedly watched in awe as the cats descended, landing amidst cheering crowds who welcomed their new four-legged defenders. For many, it was both a spectacle and a lifeline. The cats, confused but resilient, adapted quickly to their new environment, and within weeks, the rat population began to decline. Though this story is often used in environmental science lectures, it has also become something of a cultural legend, part warning, part comedy, part heroic rescue tale. It's an event so strange, so surreal, that it almost doesn't feel real. But the documentation is there. Military records, correspondence, and first-hand accounts from people who lived through the operation. It did happen. And it left behind a powerful message about the fragility of our environment and the dangers of human overreach. In the years that followed, the use of DDT would come under increased scrutiny around the world. By the 1960s and 70s, it was banned in many countries after the publication of Rachel Carson's landmark book Silent Spring, which highlighted the environmental and health dangers of the chemical. Operation Cat Drop became an early and dramatic example of the kind of ecological backfire that Carson warned about. It didn't just kill insects, it disrupted entire food chains and ecosystems. Today, British Guiana, now Guyana, is a nation still deeply connected to its rainforest heritage. Conservation efforts are stronger, and lessons from the past continue to shape how governments and environmentalists handle public health and pest control. Operation Cat Drop remains one of those rare stories where history, science, and absurdity collide, creating a narrative that is at once amusing, tragic, and unforgettable. And while the image of parachuting cats may never fade from the collective memory, the deeper lesson it carries is far more significant. When we ignore nature's balance in our pursuit of quick fixes, nature has a way of fighting back. And sometimes, it takes a sky full of cats to make things right again.